How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, we're going to continue our discussion with the Tepe killings. As you guys already know, there's an update. We have the husband who's now been arrested. That's Mike. Oh, where'd he go? Mike David McKee. His charges were updated today, or upgraded. Sorry. So he's got 2 counts of aggravated murder, and he did appear in court today, which was a quick arraignment. I have a video of that. Let me show you that. Guys, if you're not familiar with this case, I definitely would recommend you watch my other videos because we're going to kind of go right through. This will also be added to my collection as well. So I do have a whole playlist on this. But before me and Denise have our discussion, I am going to provide a little background. It could expand on a little bit of what I already provided in the other videos. But I do think it may be worth revisiting just once more before we go into me and Denise's discussion. So first, let me first show you just a quick little news report. This should note the updated charges. So let me play that.
After the double murder of a husband and wife in Ohio, police think they have their man, and they say the accused is one of the victim's ex-husband. CBS News correspondent Chanel called following this story. Chanel, by all accounts, the man accused had an amicable divorce. Everybody moved on with their lives. So what do we know about this guy?
But look, Reed, that divorce happened 10 years ago, almost a decade ago. We don't know what may or may not have happened in the years since. At this point, police are saying that the person who is at the center of this investigation, this double homicide, is 39-year-old Michael McKee. As you noted there, they are saying that he is the ex-husband of Monique Tepe. Monique and Spencer were both killed in their Columbus, Ohio home almost 2 weeks ago. As we understand it, their 2 young children were also inside that home, Reed. Obviously, just such a tragic story. Police do say, though, those kids are alive and unharmed, thankfully. But this all came to light because some of their friends came over to do a wellness check on them because Spencer had not shown up to work. So they went over, and that is when they found Spencer and Monique's bodies. Now, earlier this week, police had released some surveillance video, and I'll see if our control room can pull it up. So here it is. And you see this person with a dark jacket and light pants walking through this very snowy street with their hood pulled over their head. This person, police were looking for their identity. They were looking for help from the public to try to identify this man. Now they believe this is 39-year-old Michael McKee walking down Spencer and Monique's area in their community, in their neighborhood. And police are saying this video was actually taken just hours before their bodies were discovered. Now, we did take a look at the affidavit here. According to this, detectives say that they found him in Rockford, Illinois. And here's how they did this, Reed. They say that they were able to connect his vehicle that he was driving to a car that was also seen through surveillance video in that area of Spencer and Monique's home the night that they were murdered. We're also this hour hearing from the Tepe family. They released a statement saying, in part, the arrest represents an important step towards justice for Monique and Spencer. It goes on to say, we carry forward their love as we surround and protect the 2 children that they leave behind. As for what happens next in this case, we know that Michael McKee is set to appear in a Rockford courtroom today at about 2:30 Eastern time. So we're just about 45 minutes away from him arriving in court for his first appearance, where we will likely hear what he plans to plead in this case.
So I do have his appearance. Let's just do that, get that away. That's the last video I have. And then we're going to be talking about possible motive. But I do want to give some updates first, just to kind of bring this all full circle. All right, so this is his court appearance. He's a big guy.
Call the table, Michael McKee.
Alexander. Third quarter for the defendant is present in custody.
Your name, sir, for the record?
Michael McKee.
Have you had a chance to speak with him?
Yes, Your Honor.
What's your position at this time?
Yes, at this time, Your Honor, on behalf of Mr. McKee, I will assert his right to counsel. I will assert his right to remain silent. And Mr. McKee believes that the most expeditious manner in which he may defend himself against the charges pending in Ohio and to plead not guilty would be to waive his right to an extradition hearing and to have a governor's warrant, and to agree to his immediate transportation to Ohio.
Understood, thank you. We will set this matter then for 2 o'clock on Monday. For status on the transfer.
Thank you.
Anything else we can do today?
Not from this one.
Thank you, Kirk. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so let me, guys, give you a little bit of what the show is about today, some updates, and we're going to go right into it. I got some questions sent our way, and then when I provide them over to Denise, I have the context of the question that I want to present to you as well with the question. So before we begin, it's important to be clear about what the show is and what it won't be today. No motive has been officially released by law enforcement. Nothing discussed here is an accusation or a conclusion. This conversation is about understanding how motive is explored psychologically and clinically without excusing behavior or compromising accountability. Two things can be true at the same time. People are fully responsible for their actions, and understanding why violence happens is essential for prevention and awareness. Michael McKee, the ex-husband of Monique Tepe, there he is, and there's Monique and Spencer, has been arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder in the deaths of Monique and Spencer Tepe. These charges now have been upgraded to aggravated premeditated murder. The investigation is ongoing, and what follows is not speculation about guilt. It's a framework for understanding the psychological dynamic that can emerge in cases like this. So let's first, real quick, this is just the updates here. Now, guys, I would recommend you watch my other videos, but I'm going to speed through these. A little bit about Michael David McKee. So, guys, we already covered this in the last video, but there's a couple things I want to revisit. So Michael David McKee is a 39-year-old medical doctor, specifically a vascular surgeon, who until recently lived and worked in the Chicago area, that's Lincoln Park, and later had professional ties to Rockford, Illinois. He's now charged in connection with the December 30th, 2025 murders of Monique Tepe and her husband, Dr. Spencer Tepe, and this was inside their Columbus, Ohio home. Now, McKee graduated from the Ohio State University College of Medicine in 2014 and went on to specialize in vascular surgery. Public records and hospital listings indicate he held active medical license in multiple states, including Illinois and California, and previously Nevada. Prior to his arrest, he was listed as a surgeon affiliated with OSF St. Anthony Medical Center in Rockford, though those listings were removed after charges were announced. Colleagues and neighbors described him publicly as professionally accomplished and outwardly stable, a detail that has drawn attention but does not imply anything about guilt or motive. Then again, he married. As you can see, there's a picture of him here with Monique. Michael McKee married Monique. At the time, her last name was Sapertursky. Later, she became Monique Tepe. In August of 2015, I believe they got engaged in 2013. And their marriage lasted approximately 2 years. I give a whole detail on that marriage and divorce because I had the court documents, and I did that in a video just before this. So please, that video is in the 70-something thousand views right now. I did it a couple of days ago. That gives you a little bit more details than I'm going to provide now. This is just to give us some momentum going forward. Michael, all right, so wait. Divorce details just real quick. The couple divorced in 2017 with the divorce finalized that year. No children were born of that marriage. There are no publicly reported records of domestic violence calls, protection orders, or criminal charges arising from the divorce itself. And reporting indicates the divorce was legally completed and finalized with no ongoing litigation between them at the time Monique later married Spencer Tepe. Some reporting and court record summaries indicate that Monique assumed certain consumer debt obligations as part of the divorce settlement, and there is no public evidence of continued legal or financial disputes between McKee and Monique after the divorce was finalized. Importantly, there is no verified reporting that the divorce was ongoing, contested at the time of the murders or that McKee had any legal control, custody disputes, or financial entanglements with Monique after 2017. Now, a little bit about Monique's life after the divorce. Following the divorce, Monique went on to build a new life. She later married Dr. Spencer Tepe in 2021, and the couple had 2 young children, ages 4 and 1 at the time of their death. Family and friends have consistently described Monique and Spencer's relationship as loving, stable, and deeply family-oriented. There's no publicly released evidence of domestic issues within the Tepe marriage, and police have stated there was no known history of domestic violence at that residence. So real quick, got the connection to the murder. McKee is accused of traveling to Columbus, Ohio, and killing both Monique and Spencer in their home in the early morning hours of December 30th, 2025. According to the official complaint, the crime is believed to have occurred at approximately 3:52 a.m. Investigators allege the killing occurred upstairs with no signs of forced entry and that the couple's children and dog were left unharmed. There's some rumor mill going on social media right now that when he did the killings, he did what he could to protect the children first. I'm talking about the killer, Michael McKee, but that's rumor mills. That's what's being spread on the internet right now. Police linked McKee to the case through surveillance video showing a vehicle consistent with one associated with him near the area, subsequent location of that vehicle in Rockford, Illinois, and coordinated law enforcement tracking that led to his arrest on January 10, 2026. He was initially held in Winnebago County, Illinois, and on January 12th, that's today, 2026, McKee waived his extradition hearing, meaning he agreed to be transported to Ohio to face charges in Franklin County, and the exact timeline for his extradition has not been publicly announced. We know there's a follow-up on Monday. What we know and what we don't know. What we know, McKee and Monique were divorced for approximately 8 years before the murders. There were no public legal disputes between them at the time. The state now alleges the killings were premeditated and involved prior calculation and design. The official complaint indicates the crime occurred at approximately 3:52 a.m. on December 30th, 2025. McKee waived extradition on January 12th, 2026, and will be transported to Ohio. The case is now positioned as a capital-level prosecution, and what we do not know is any official motive, whether there was recent contact between McKee and Monique, what specific evidence prosecutors believe establishes prior calculation, when exactly McKee will arrive in Ohio, and whether the case will proceed to trial or resolve through a plea. Why the divorce context matters? The divorce matters only as factual background, not as proof of motive. Former relationships often receive intense public focus in homicide cases because they feel emotionally explanatory, but investigators must rely on evidence, timelines, and behaviors, not assumptions. As of now, no official narrative has been released tying the divorce itself to the alleged crime. Now, one last part, Denise, then we'll get it in. This will be the legal update. So recent developments, we'll just revisit. Prosecutors have upgraded the charges against Michael McKee to aggravated premeditated murder. This is not just a procedural change. It fundamentally alters the legal landscape of this case. This upgrade signals that the state believes the evidence supports planning, intent, and statutory aggravating factors, including multiple victims. What does aggravated murder mean under Ohio's law? In Ohio, aggravated murder is the most serious criminal charge available. To pursue it, prosecutors must allege and later prove at trial that the killing involved at least one of the following: prior calculation and design, so planning, not impulsive action, multiple victims, and other statutory aggravators. In the Tepe case, prosecutors are alleging 2 victims and premeditation, which is why the charge was escalated. What penalties are now legally on the table? Because of the upgrade, the possible sentence now includes life in prison without parole, life in prison with parole eligibility after 20 to 30 years, or death penalty. Important distinction, just because the death penalty is legally available does not mean it will be imposed or even carried out. Ohio's death penalty right now is at a moratorium. This is one of the most commonly misunderstood aspects of the case. Yes, a person can still be sentenced to death in Ohio. Ohio currently has a moratorium on executions, not on death sentences. Here's what that means. Courts can still impose a death sentence. Prosecutors can still seek the death penalty. Juries can still recommend death. The state is not currently carrying out executions. So legally, the death penalty still exists. It's just not being implemented at the execution stage. That distinction matters significantly in charging and plea negotiations. You'll see that also in the state of California as well with some of the cases that we've been following here. And someone asked, does the death penalty still matter if it's not being carried out? And it's yes, very much so. Even under a moratorium, death sentence still means death row. It still carries maximum leverage for prosecutors. It still shapes trial strategy, mitigation, and pleas, and it can later be commuted to life without parole. So from a legal strategy standpoint, the death penalty remains a powerful tool, even if executions are paused. And could this be used as plea bargain? As I mentioned, yes, absolutely. And this is critical. In cases like this, prosecutors often use aggravated murder charges and death penalty eligibility to push for a plea to life without parole, avoid a long traumatic capital trial, and secure certainty for the victims' families. A common outcome in similar cases, the state agrees not to seek the death penalty in exchange for life without parole plea. That does not mean a plea is guaranteed, but the legal leverage is now there. And what the upgrade tells us and what it doesn't. What it does tell us is prosecutors believe evidence supports planning and prior calculation. The state is treating this like a capital level case, and the prosecution is preparing for a long, complex fight. What it does not tell us, it does not reveal motive, it does not prove guilt, it does not mean the death penalty will be imposed, and it does not tell us how the case will resolve. Why investigators still aren't talking about motive? Once aggravated murder and capital exposure in play, prosecutors become extremely cautious about public statements. Anything said now can prejudice a jury, complicate a penalty phase, or impact plea negotiations. Silence at this stage is strategic, not evasive. And two last parts. The extradition update on January 12, 2026, as we mentioned, McKee waived his right to extradition hearing in Illinois. This means he has agreed to be transported to Ohio to face the charges in Franklin County without contesting the transfer. By waiving extradition, McKee expedited the process, though the exact timing of his transfer to Ohio has not been publicly announced. Once in Ohio, he'll be arraigned on the upgraded charges and the legal proceeding will move forward. And lastly, the big picture. Right now, the Tepe case is legally positioned as a capital eligible double homicide with allegations of prior calculation, carrying penalties up to life without parole or death, and still fully subject to due process and presumption of innocence. McKee's waiver of extradition means the case will now proceed in Ohio, and the upgrade raises the stakes, but it does not end the story. All right, that's all the updates. I love you, Denise. I mean, there's a lot there, but a lot happened this morning. A lot was rolling, and we already had plans to do the show, but I wanted to at least put everything relevant, and then I wind up having to send you the questions again.
Yes.
Because I had to make some adjustments. But real quick, what are your thoughts on these upgrades? I mean, what's your thoughts?
It's unbelievable. The interesting thing to me is he seemed pretty calm and cooperative and all that in his court hearing this morning. And he didn't seem frazzled. He seemed very polite. He seemed, almost like, he was just sort of a regular day at the office, which I found interesting.
I think in my mind, he was prepared for these consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, he may have ran off a little bit, but he didn't make it easy, but I think he was prepared.
I think so too. And even like shook the prosecutor or whoever the attorney was, he shook her hand, and it was just almost like a very casual meeting.
Yeah, but if you look at it from another perspective too, it could be a little bit scary because they say sometimes doctors, in order to do what they do, sometimes some of them, not all guys, just hear me out, but I've read this on a site one time, is that they see people as objective. As objects. That's why they're able to cut somebody open and make the decisions they have to make. So some of them kind of, not all guys, but some of them desensitize themselves. So maybe in his mind, Monique and Tepe, Monique and Spencer are just objects to him at this point, and objects that were an obstacle at some level for him.
If anything, to me, it's concerning because there's just no emotion there. He walks in and, he stands there and he's very cooperative and he answers appropriately and he shakes her hand and he walks out. And
yet it's funny because I could picture this crime, what he did, based on emotion.
Yeah, exactly. But it seems to me, when you were reading, it just seemed very calculated.
No. I agree. I think he calculated it and also kind of already put into his mind that he's going to get caught. Yeah.
I mean, how could they not catch him? Plus, it's not like he's a short guy. He's a big guy. On surveillance, he stands out.
Yeah. So I think that is interesting, the way he's standing out. I love the audience thoughts on this. So I have some questions I want to send your way for discussion. There's 12 of them, but you know us, we'll discuss. So I put some context before I give you the question, so it has a little bit of a strong introduction.
Okay.
I want to mention something. This is important because a lot of people think that when we look for motive, we're giving excuses or we're trying to justify what happened. That's not the case, guys. We're trying to go ahead and provide reason, because reason has so many so much need. It's for closure, for prevention. So when news broke that Michael McKee had been arrested in the murders of Monique and Spencer Tepe, I noticed something shift in the public conversation. There was almost a collective exhale, not relief, but a kind of psychological settling. People finally had someone to point to, a name, a former husband, a potential motive that fit a recognizable pattern, the ex-spouse violence. And I think that reaction reveals something important about how we process tragedy, especially in cases like the Tepe murders. We need closure, even tentative closure, because without it, there's fear and the ambiguity. The unknown is terrifying. Most people want to understand why so they can ensure their own safety. And as difficult as this sounds, once people learned it was Monique's ex-husband, many could distance themselves emotionally, and pretty much they could think, that's her situation, not mine. I'm not in that position. And it's not that people are cold, it's that they need psychological distance from randomness. The alternative, that Spencer and Monique could have been killed by a stranger for reasons we'll never understand, is psychologically unbearable for most people. So when Michael McKee was arrested, it gave the public an answer. Right or wrong, complete or incomplete, it was something. And that something allowed people to feel safer, even if the facts are still developing. But now, with the upgraded charges alleging premeditation, the idea that this was planned, calculated, thought through over time, the public narrative has shifted again. It's no longer just the ex-husband snapped, it's now the ex-husband planned this. And that raises a whole new set of questions about why someone would spend time planning to kill two people in the early morning hours, and according to the official complaint, at approximately 3:52 a.m. on December 30th, including the mother of his former including the mother of his former marriage who had moved on years ago. I may have worded that wrong. That we meant, including Monique. And I put specifically moved on years ago from her, because we're looking at 8 years ago they got divorced.
Yes.
So I'm going to send the question your way. She's already seen the question, guys, so I'm going to kind of read it off to her. But feel free also, if you're in the audience, to comment as well, because I would love your opinion. This is how the dialogue grows. So Denise, help me understand this clinically. In a case like the Tepe murders, why do people feel such an urgent need to explain why, when a tragedy happens, even before all the facts are known, and when Michael McKee was arrested, the public seemed to immediately construct a narrative around him being the ex-husband. And now with prosecutors alleging premeditation, not a crime of passion, but planning, does that change how people psychologically process this? Is there something even more unsettling about planned violence versus impulsive violence when it comes to former intimate partners?
Well, I whether it's planned or it's impulsive, when we hear of a murder or anything tragic, the first thing that we're concerned about is ourselves. Should I be concerned? Is this something that I should fear for my children, and so forth? When we hear that it's somebody that she knew or is an ex-husband and it was premeditated, even though we shouldn't feel relieved, we feel like we can make sense of it, and we cannot be as worried for our own well-being, which it does sound selfish, but it's just sort of the nature of how we are.
Yeah, and guys, I saw that in some interviews. Now they've been covering true crime. When a case, opens up and we don't know of all the facts, a lot of people do get concerned because they think it's random, and a lot of them like, no, this can't be random. I need to know what's happening, and
right.
And then eventually, as we get closer and we start to kind of figure out who is it, then people try to kind of separate themselves a little bit. And I do think at one point it's like, well, it was her ex-husband. It's not my ex-husband. So it was her ex-husband. And also, when we try to provide a motive, the motive is really just to get an understanding and not to provide an excuse. I think that's key. Would you agree with that?
I agree. And when we talk about motive, honestly, I'm a therapist and I have no idea why people do what they do. I mean, it's hard to know what people are thinking that makes them do these terrible crimes. We just know that they're happening. And what we're trying to do is get some insight so that maybe it'll prevent somebody else from being harmed.
Yeah, guys, as we go through, we'll talk more about the planning and the premeditation, because that does change the game a little bit. But I have one more part about the motive and why motive gets confused with excuse. And I'm only doing this because I see it in the comments. So the stuff that I'm putting out there is because I see it being questioned, and not just the comments of my videos, but comments in other videos. So for me, understanding motive in the Tepe case is about prevention. Again, I work in corrections. I'm very big on asking why, because by knowing why, sometimes I like to think I'm able to get ahead of it if it happens again. But if I just look at things blindly and say, oh, it's only happened once, it'll never happen to me, who cares how it happened? It's going to happen again.
Yes.
If we don't understand why Monique and Spencer were killed, and I mean really understand it based on evidence, not assumption, then we can't address the conditions that allowed it to happen. We can't intervene earlier in future cases. And motive should be evidence-based. It's not meant to excuse behavior. It's meant to understand it so we can prevent this from happening to someone else. But I know a lot of people hear discussions about Michael McKee's possible motive and immediately think we're trying to justify what happened. It's not what this is. Accountability is absolute, but understanding motive and holding someone accountable aren't mutually exclusive. They work together. And now that prosecutors are alleging premeditation, prior calculation, and design, the motive questions become even more important. If Michael McKee spent time planning this, what was he trying to resolve? What was he trying to control? What internal narrative was he operating under that led him to believe this was the solution? If this was premeditated, it wasn't a momentary loss of control, it was a decision. And understanding what drives someone to make that decision is critical for prevention. So, Denise, why do people often confuse motive with explanation or even justification in violent crimes like this? So when we explore why Michael McKee might have done this, especially now that prosecutors allege he planned it, that it wasn't impulsive, how do we as people trying to understand these cases responsibly draw that line between seeking understanding and appearing to excuse the inexcusable? And does premeditation change the conversation about motive? Does planned violence require a different psychological framework than impulsive violence?
Okay, so in this case, there are a lot of missing pieces, but let's try to put the pieces that we know together. One, Monique married a vascular surgeon, which is, I mean, it's pretty much it's a very prestigious position as a doctor. Likely he made a lot of money. And so that's sort of the golden ticket, if you will. I'm sure she had a lot to bring to the table too. They were only married 2 years before she's out. No children, no nothing. And so to me, that's sort of a red flag. Like, why only 2 years? You married this guy. He makes probably, if he doesn't make $1 million, he probably makes close. And all of a sudden, 2 years, there's no baby, no nothing. You're just out. Then she remarries and she seems to be pretty happy. They have 2 children, but you got to remember, like with McKee, this is all about power and control. And a lot of times when the ex moves on and is somewhat happy, and then they don't think that they deserve to be happy. And a lot of times I've seen where they will kill the spouse, but in this case, it was not only his ex-wife, but it was her husband. And he did it at 4 o'clock in the morning. So late enough that not too many of the neighbors are up, and early enough in the morning that hopefully somebody would discover it and the kids would be okay. So to me, there's a lot of things a lot of the pieces that I'm putting together that to me are very interesting.
You hit a good point. I was discussing that today. So be advised, I agree with you about the marriage, but I think it was the potential, because they both were making around $50,000 when they got married, but she married someone who's on their way to becoming a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
So the future, I think, but then I think something was serious, because I think that marriage was something looking in the future, and to break it off within 2 years, and even less than that, they stopped living together after 7 months. So
yep. There's a problem.
Definitely, because I think this marriage was about the potential of where it can go. And then to not even get past 7 months, because even though they got divorced within 2 years, they separated 7 months. But you mentioned something that was so key. I was discussing this at work today. So when I heard this rumor mill that he did what he could to protect the kids, that's some rumor mill. Again, I don't know how true that is, and that doesn't negate the fact that he's still a monster, but check this out. He did choose a work week.
Yep.
Right? He chose a work week where he knew that I thought of this with the kids. If they were at the house, someone would notice that Spencer and Monique were nowhere around and then would eventually go to the house. So you're right. I mean, could this have been so premeditated that he chose a work week? Because if he was really thinking of himself, hear me out, and I could be wrong, he could have done it on a Friday night.
Yep. Or 1 a.m.
Yeah, and I could be way off on this, but he chose a weekday, and I agree with you, Denise. I think to some level he could have chosen a weekday and that time frame, because it would only leave the kids a few hours of being unattended. Maybe we're giving them too much, but you think that makes sense, right?
I do, absolutely.
That is extremely interesting. I was discussing that today at work, and it's unique. I was talking to my partner, the superintendent, and I said it's crazy because he really didn't want to get caught. Why not, buy himself some more time and do it on a Friday night or when they don't have to report to work the next day?
Yeah.
We said, well, what about if when you have this rumor mill of him, trying to protect these kids? Maybe he strategically chose that day and time for a reason.
Yeah, it's interesting that he got past the dog.
Well, I don't know. So I don't know if he's ever been in a house before. That you're right.
Yeah, or the dog's crated, maybe. You never know, like at nighttime. If the dog
barks, could it really be heard?
Yeah, but the dog didn't bark enough to cause any. Like if somebody's up at 1 a.m. that they're alarmed. At 4 a.m. everybody's out, and likely the dog barking is.
And you know what? We don't know yet, but there could have been surveillance cameras in the house. Maybe in the bedroom with the kids. I mean, we don't know what other evidence they have outside of what they showed us. And there are some speculation too which makes sense. Actually, we'll get to that because that may go into a later question. So I'm going to wait on this. So why former relationships become the focal point? So when the Tepe case first broke, before Michael McKee was arrested, a lot of people immediately started looking at Monique and Spencer's relationship history. Who were they? How long had they been together? Was Monique previously married? And once Michael McKee was identified as Monique's ex-husband, that became the lens through which everything was interpreted. Because after they both were killed, people were looking at Mike. There's even something I read.
I bet he was a problem. I bet he had been a problem.
I trust the source here, but it said this is someone that knew Michael McKee and said this information was shared by a friend. It goes, I knew Mike as well as anyone could. He was my chief resident. He taught me how to operate. He was technically excellent, better than a lot of attendings. We joked he was a robot and would just charge his batteries because he was very hard to get any emotional response from. We also had a murder mystery party, and he was the murderer. We changed his name to Ricky Rochester for that, since we always joked he was a murderer, but it was always a joke at the time. He never seriously dated that we knew of while we trained together. He went to Maryland for vascular surgery fellowship. It's normal for vascular surgery folks to not pursue their general surgery board certification since they won't use it. And he also just finished vascular not too long ago. It takes about 2 years to get board certified after graduating. So again, it comes from a good source, so I wanted to share, but it's not validated through law enforcement.
Sounds reasonable. And as far as we know, he never moved on. A vascular surgeon who's young enough. I mean, usually they find somebody pretty quickly because they're very attractive because of their money making ability and prestige.
Yeah, it said, as you said, yeah, right. He never dated again. Or I know people are saying that he may have married after that, but that's not confirmed yet either. So there's some crazy rumors going around about that.
Yeah, I
bet. Okay, so once Michael McKee was identified as Monique's ex-husband, that became the lens through which everything was interpreted. Now, I think that's partly because it's easier to understand violence within the context of jealousy, betrayal, rage, especially when it involves an ex-spouse. It's a quick motive that gives meaning and makes sense. Most people don't want to imagine a stranger walked into the home and killed them both because it's random. There's no closure. There's no way to make sense of it in a manner that lets you feel safe. It can't be pushed off as just their problem or an isolated incident. it becomes everyone's problem. So we go to what we know and what makes sense. And statistically, the people we're most connected to, former partners, ex-spouses, are also the ones most likely to harm us. Intimate partner violence, even post-separation, is one of the leading causes of homicide for women, but less for homicide for men, by the way, a lot less, I think like 3%. But I also wanted to add something here that I think gets overlooked, especially in this case. When Monique married Spencer, she brought her past with her. Michael McKee was part of that past. And when we marry someone, we marry their history to some extent. We bring our unresolved emotions, our attachments, our former relationships into new partnerships. And sometimes these things don't just fade, they linger. They remain active psychologically, even when we think we moved on. And now with the allegation of premeditation, the idea that Michael may have been planning this over time, it raises the question, was he watching? Was he aware of Monique's new life with Spencer? Was he planning this while she was building a family, having children, moving forward? And by the way, they are all over social media, even prior to this. So he would have access to their wedding video, a couple of things he could have been watching. So Denise, why do former romantic relationships like Michael McKee's marriage to Monique become such a focal point in public narratives after homicide cases? And can you speak to how a past marriage can remain psychologically active even after someone has moved on and remarried? Could Monique's new life with Spencer have been perceived by Michael as a rejection or replacement that never fully resolved for him internally? And with prosecutors now alleging premeditation, does that suggest Michael may have been ruminating on this for months or even years, watching from a distance, planning and waiting for the right moment? And that's scary.
Yes. Well, certainly now that we look back on it, we can see that there was some pathology there. There was some problem there. And what happens with these type of dynamics is they get addicted. They get addicted to what they're doing and don't want them to move on and so forth. I bet you there's a lot of history between the two of them. I bet there's a lot of text exchanges. I imagine that Michael was always sort of lurking because I thankfully they didn't have any kids together, but you can imagine it'd even be worse. But the fact that she moved on, married and had children, and he was still had an attachment or an obsession with her is really concerning.
Right. And we're going to get to that later because I agree. I think that there was always this quiet hope, and then something recently led to something definitive. It could have been the final cutoff, or maybe the video that he watched that finally said it really is done. They are happy, and how can they live being happy and I'm not happy?
Right.
You know? And we know that he shot Spencer multiple times, may have only shot Monique once. But, his frustration could have been, at Spencer for, in his mind, stealing my love.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Spencer gave him, maybe woke up or something. I mean, somebody got shot first. Spencer could have, wakened and sort of given him a little bit of trouble. But he's a big guy. And Spencer didn't look to be like a really big guy. But I'm telling you, I've seen these cases where the person that does the violence, I mean, they just get crazed and they go in and they're very calculated and they're convinced that person is not going to live if they're not in their lives.
Right. And you're right, because the main question here is going to be, do we have, because it is premeditated. So again, we think it's premeditated. That's what the charges are. So planning, we don't know how long this could have been planned out. We don't know how honest he was when he was arrested. I mean, maybe he's, prepared for this route more than we think. I mean, he's an educated guy. I'm not familiar with the system so much because he doesn't really have a criminal history, but, he is a smarter, I mean, you have to be. He
is smart, but he's almost thinks that rules don't apply to him either, the way he's acting.
That's another perspective, being too smart or thinking you're too smart. Let's just do that. You're thinking you're too smart. You're pushing into high levels of narcissism. But I wanted to mention something. So we either have a process that was just thought out but took time, or we have something that just triggered and ignited. I think it's more of it took time and evolved.
Yeah, as opposed I think it got worse. I think it exacerbated as things went on. I think it got worse.
Yeah, and then maybe he was just waiting for the trigger. You know, so it's not so much that the trigger motivated, but he was waiting for the right moment.
Yeah, or the holidays sort of brought the trigger in. You know, she's got what, 1 and a 4-year-old?
Yeah.
You know, and so maybe the holidays sort of brought up this, you know, she doesn't get to be happy, and, you know, God knows what she posted on social media, but
it's unique you said that too, because, you know, we do the holidays for the children. So let's say there is this context that he wanted to protect the children and then, you know, keep them out of this, and then also do it on a day where they could easily be discovered, like we mentioned. Well, we know killing them on the holidays would affect them. So maybe he waited till after Christmas.
yeah, who knows? Or the holidays just sort of pushed him over the edge and he wanted to, you know, get it and end it. It's hard to know what somebody that does this type of crime is thinking. Yeah.
So moving on, versus unresolved attachment. So this is more kind of like after the breakup and then just trying to move on, but you can't and you're stuck. And then you're looking at social media and you see that your other partner has moved on, and, you know, basically what type of feelings are you going to get from that? So this is something I've been thinking about a lot in the Tepe case, especially now with the upgraded charges. From the outside, it may have appeared that Michael McKee had moved on. Maybe he was functioning, working, living his life post-divorce. But people can become excellent performers. They can bottle up their concerns, feelings, emotions about the end of a marriage and make an effort to reconcile them internally, and they live as if they're unaffected. But the truth is they often just one drip away from being overwhelmed and losing their sense of control. They may have good moments, but those moments are fleeting. And usually they find themselves lost in what they once had with their ex-spouse. They may even fantasize about going back to how things were as a way to maintain some control over their internal narrative. And here's the scary part. As long as that possibility exists in their mind, even if it's completely unrealistic, even if Monique has remarried and built a new life with Spencer, they can hold it together. But once that road is definitively cut off, once they realize there is no going back, they can lose their sense of control entirely. Control over who they are, their emotions, their identity as Monique's former husband. And that's when they can become fixated on making it right. And that's when they become dangerous. But premeditation changes this picture. If prosecutors are right and Michael planned this over time, then it wasn't a sudden snap. It was a slow build. It was rumination turning into obsession, turning into fixation, turning into planning, turning into action. Now, clinically speaking, Denise, could Michael McKee have appeared to have moved on from his marriage to Monique while still holding unresolved emotional attachment internally? And what happens psychologically when that internal narrative, that hope of reconciliation or return, finally collapses? But here's what I'm really asking. With prosecutors alleging premeditation, does that suggest that the collapse didn't happen suddenly, that instead Michael may have been living in that collapsed state for months or years, planning this methodically while appearing stable on the outside? And what does that kind of long-term psychological state look like? And why does it become so dangerous? There's a lot there.
I think he was addicted to her. I think he was addicted to the power and control over her. And this is what we see with this type of dynamic. I mean, the fact that, again, they were only married 2 years, to me, I think she wised up to him and she got out. But that doesn't mean that he didn't stop fixating over her and obsessing over her. To me, the strange part for me is that it took so many years to actually play out. That's why I said when I first started to talk that there's a lot of missing pieces here. I bet anything that he was constantly sort of just every once in a while just harassing her and checking in and like following her on Instagram and doing like sort of creepy things. And, you know, he likely could just get away with it. But then all of a sudden now this happened. But I wouldn't be surprised if they had a lot of exchanges in between this, because this is a long period of time before, you know, they get divorced. And then all of a sudden he comes in and he kills her and her husband.
Well, that's what makes it, because you have 8 years. So you're assuming, you're assuming things would be more impulsive within the first couple of years of that divorce. Exactly. But it's not.
Before she married, you know,
it gave her 5 years to establish a life.
Yeah.
I mean, could he have premeditated to that point where I'm going to wait for you to get happy because you ruined my life, and now I'm going to wait for you to get happy, and then I'm going to take away everything from you?
Exactly.
I mean, could he given her that just in spite? which you never know. I mean, you got
True.
someone who became a doctor, right? So those degrees, they take a while. So you have someone that could be extremely patient, waiting for the right moment, and somehow this becomes the right moment. But I think it is a combination of what was left 8 years ago, and then just how it evolved over time into something where he just couldn't get past the relationship to a point where the only control he could have back with his life, even if it's sitting in prison, was to get rid of her and her man, because at this point here, I have no control of who I am. So I at least I know with you out of the picture, even if I'm in prison, I still have, I can maybe get that sense of me back.
Yeah. And he wanted this more than he wanted his lavish lifestyle of being a single doctor, making a lot of money. I'm sure he had a nice car and a beautiful home, but he wanted this to end and spend the rest of his life in prison or facing the consequences more than he wanted his lavish lifestyle that he went through medical school and all this training. I mean, you think about that. And it's like, it really is it's just your ex, is this worth it when you've got everything, you got a wonderful life on the other side, but he wanted this more.
And I agree with you, because I think he's smart enough to know that he would have been, he was going to get caught.
Of course he's going to get caught. I mean, they're going to look at every little, and nowadays everybody's got a camera. I mean, somebody's going to pick it up.
And it's funny because as we talked about jealousy, betrayal, so, jealousy would fuel his emotions towards Spencer. Betrayal would be more about Monique. So those are two very powerful emotions. Jealousy to Spencer because you got what I can't have. Betrayal from Monique because you left me for him. Because the more he sees Monique as betraying him, the jealousy heightens between him and Spencer. Yeah. So you got two powerful emotions acting at once. And I would say that the reason why he shot, shot Spencer more times than he shot Monique. Now, granted, you could always say, and I'll get to it, position or maybe Spencer posed as more of a threat. But if he went at these hours, maybe Spencer wasn't a threat. But I think jealousy comes with hate, and he was just killing something that he couldn't be, which is the husband to Monique.
Yeah, or the ultimate revenge.
Ultimate revenge, and then for Monique, it was maybe the one shot I did. But there was a connection to her, and I think that connection is what allowed him to feel betrayed, because you only feel betrayed from the people you're the closest to.
Yeah, it's true.
I can't feel betrayed from a stranger.
Right. Exactly.
But if I found out that Denise was cheating on me by going on other shows, joking, no. But I it makes sense if you look at it from his emotion. Jealousy right here. And betrayal right here. Now, this does relate to identity disruption. So building on that, I think loss of control is one of the most dangerous psychological states someone can experience. And I think it may be central to understanding what happened in the Tepe case. If Michael McKee's sense of self was deeply tied to being Monique's husband, and then that role was taken away through divorce and then replaced by Spencer, it ties into his existence, his identity, and it can make someone feel like they're a prisoner within their own emotions. Sometimes that lack of control can pull someone into hopelessness, and they don't want to stay there. They may feel backed into a corner, and when someone feels cornered, that's when they become dangerous. They may seek control, and in some cases, control cannot be negotiated. It has to be absolute. In this case, Spencer wasn't just Monique's new husband. He may have represented everything Michael had lost: his role, his identity, his place in Monique's life. And if Michael couldn't negotiate his way back into that role, if he couldn't convince Monique to come back, couldn't undo the divorce, couldn't remove Spencer from the picture through any means other than force, then control had to be taken absolutely. And with premeditation now alleged, we're not talking about a momentary decision. We're talking about someone who may have spent time calculating how to regain control, planning it, working through it, and deciding that violence was the only path forward. So here's the next set of questions. And guys, I know to usually ask the questions one at a time, but I gave her the questions ahead of time because I know we're very limited on time. So Denise knows, she's good. So I get it, guys. I know I'll probably get some lectures, Angie, you're giving her too much. I just don't want to have the show run into 2 hours. So how does perceived loss of control or identity affect someone psychologically, especially after major life changes like divorce or being replaced in a partner's life? So in Michael McKee's case, if his sense of self was tied to being Monique's husband and Spencer took that role, could that loss have felt like annihilation rather than just disappointment? And when that loss becomes unbearable, why does the need for control sometimes become absolute, non-negotiable, to the point where violence becomes the only solution they can see? But here's the critical piece. With prosecutors alleging prior calculation and design, what does it mean psychologically when someone doesn't just react to that loss of control, but plans a response to it over time? What does that tell us about their mental state?
Well, it's interesting because usually when divorces happen and they're healthy, people just move on. And again, it's the ex-husband. It sort of becomes part of what is. In this case, I imagine, or I can envision him stalking her. And I think the more that he saw that she was moving on with her life, she gets married, she has one kid, she has another kid. Now he's losing power. And as we know, and you know this in corrections, once they start to lose power, they become desperate and they become more aggressive. And that's what I really think happened. I think he probably watched her or followed her on social media. And I think the more that her life progressed and the more that it was very apparent that, that he was out of the picture, I think everything heightened. And I think that he wanted her life to be ended. And he wanted the husband's ended too.
So is anger the primary feeling here, or is there something else that fuels
power and control? It's all about
power and control. So as he's watching, because I do believe it could be this, where he's watching social media, seeing her life, and as I said, I think got jealousy on one side. I mean, he's got multiple feelings happening at once. I would think jealousy, betrayal, as we mentioned. But would that be all fueled with rage or anger, or what's fueling the jealousy? What's fueling the betrayal?
Well, what happens when we lose power and control? We get angry. We see it in the news. We get aggressive. We start to act impulsively and so forth. In these romantic marriages and divorces and all of that, I mean, the things that I hear that people do, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're doing that. And the fact that they go out of their way to stalk each other or find out from friends what they're doing and who they're seeing and what they're planning on and so forth. I mean, it's just abnormal. It's like sort of a sick obsession. And then they get to the point where they don't want them to have any sort of life if they can't be in control of them. And that's when, and I've seen this before. I mean, this is a really sad case, but this is not the first time I've seen this, where the one will go and kill the other one because they want power and control. And if they can't have it, they don't get to live.
Right. And I like what you're saying, because we're also talking about power and control. We're also talking about sense of self in this case here, because I think at some point his sense of self could have been given to Monique. I mean, I like to think when we get married, we're in love, we do lose a piece of ourselves to some extent. But hopefully it's a piece we can recover if the relationship doesn't work well, but sometimes you can't. Now, it's funny, as we see him getting arrested, and you mentioned something great before. You said, he looks happy, or he looks, you didn't say the word happy. I apologize. You said he looked like not bothered, but let me, what was the exact thing you said? Do you remember?
When he went into the courtroom?
When he was in the courtroom, it's not that he looked happy, but what was the word you said?
Well, he certainly looked calm and like it was almost like a transactional thing.
I want to build on that, but I think I could be wrong, but tell me what you think here. Sorry. So he's burdened down with these feelings of emotion, like jealousy, betrayal, probably fueled by rage or anger, whatever it is, right? Then he commits to this act. Could that, in my mind, and that in his mind, be an overwhelming sense of freedom now?
Or I would say revenge. Like it's just like the ultimate revenge. She doesn't get to live and he doesn't get to live. And you think about that and you're like, that's sick. but that's what happens. I mean, they get to that point where if they don't get to have power and control, if they don't get to be the husband or the companion, then she doesn't get to move on. And this is not the first case I've seen like this.
So I could see that too, because I think revenge would come with a feeling of cockiness, maybe to some extent. And I could see a little bit of that when he walked into the courtroom. But I could also see, just be fair, I could see what you just said, though. But I also want to add the other picture, too, that there also could be a level of freedom. Imagine this, though. You're holding on to this feeling for 8 years. 8 years, let's say, watching social media, building that rage, the jealousy, the betrayal, whatever it is, and just compounding. And then you kill them both, right? You kill them both. And then the feeling disappears. There's no more social media for him to look at anymore. Yeah. Could he have been so, and we're going to get to this, could he have been so obsessed and fixated on this that he had to, that he felt he had to free himself by ending it? Because maybe he felt himself going on social media every day, looking at every update, and just, it was messing with his life so much that he had to free himself from it.
Yeah, or he thought that this was it. This is how he needed to take care of it. But I'm telling you, if I had to guess, she saw this side of him before when she was married to him. That's why she was out so quickly. Because, marrying somebody that's going through medical school and you're going to build this wonderful life. I mean, she had everything lined up for a beautiful life. And then all of a sudden in 7 months, they're separated and she's getting a divorce. I think she saw this side of him quickly. I just think that it was too late. I think he was already preoccupied with her, and she was never going to escape him.
Interesting, because I could see that too. Wow, so many angles we just presented.
Yeah.
I wanted to do this part because I see in the thing obsession, rumination, fixation. So I'm trying to think, chicken or the egg, what comes first? Or do they all run at the same time? Or is it obsession or rumination, obsession? I mean, it's actually something I don't think has ever been discussed like we're going to do it now. But I did do this. My focus is always going to be the fixation is what leads to the action.
Yes.
So I was kind of battling with obsession and rumination first.
Yeah.
So I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure I have this right, which is why I'm asking you. But I kind of see this as a chicken or the egg situation when I think about what might have been happening in Michael McKee's mind. So I see fixation as the end result of either rumination or obsession. I just don't know which one feeds the other. Does obsession lead to rumination, or does rumination lead to obsession? What I do know is that I see fixation as the greater concern. Once someone becomes fixated, in this case, potentially fixated on Monique and what he lost, on Spencer as the obstacle, we have to be concerned about where their actions are going to lead. Did Michael spend months or years ruminating on the divorce? Was he obsessed with thoughts of Monique and Spencer together? And did that eventually turn into fixation, a decision that he had to act, that he had to resolve this permanently? And with prosecutors now alleging premeditation, it seems like that's exactly what may have happened. That rumination fed obsession, obsession fed fixation, and fixation led to planning, planning led to action. So, Denise, what's the difference between fixation, obsession, and rumination, and why does that distinction matter when we try to understand a case like this? If Michael McKee was ruminating on the divorce, obsessing over Monique's new life with Spencer, could that have eventually crossed over into fixation where thought became action-oriented? And do these three operate in isolation, or do they work together either simultaneously or sequentially? And with premeditation now alleged, does that suggest a progression from rumination to obsession to fixation to planning? Is that a recognizable clinical pattern? And at what point in that progression should someone have been genuinely concerned that Michael was moving from thought to action?
Yes. So the fixation and the obsession and the rumination, we're pretty much talking about the same thing. We're pretty much talking about going into the mind and thinking and overthinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. And then eventually you get sort of addicted to the thought. And in order to do an action, it has to start with a thought. So then, we start talking ourselves into whatever we're fixating on. And then all of a sudden we come up with sort of a plan on how to relieve this obsession and this fixation and this rumination. And in this case, he's obsessed with her. He's obsessed with her. He's obsessed with her life. He's obsessed with her children or whatever he's obsessed with. And all of a sudden, the only way to end that is to make sure that all that goes away. So you can sort of understand, not that you can justify how it happened, but that was just basically a way to sort of stop the rumination and the fixation. Now it's gotten to the point where he pretty much carried out the act that he was obsessing about, and pretty much now it's done. And he doesn't really, from what we saw in the courtroom, he sort of, not that he doesn't care, but he certainly doesn't seem to have any emotion about it. He just obsessed to the point where he just took care of it, and now it's all taken care of, which to me, it's sick to think about that mindset, but certainly that's what happens when the mind gets involved.
Now, is this an internal thing, or does this leak out? Would his friends know that, hey, you're a little obsessed here, or is this something that he would know or be able to keep quiet?
Just by looking at him, I can see where to me, he's very mysterious. And it would be interesting to know people that worked with him, but he seems very, I wouldn't say cold, but he seems very matter of fact. And certainly I know he's in the courtroom, but he didn't strike me as a warm and fuzzy type. And sometimes we used to joke about surgeons like that. They could be pretty, I wouldn't say heartless, because that's not a very nice word, but sometimes they're pretty matter of fact. They do the surgery and they can disconnect very quickly and so forth. He, to me, didn't seem very warm and genuine, even in his pictures. To me, his energy just seemed a little off.
I always tell people, I've mentored a few, and I said, and it was about negative energy sort of, and you have to be careful of the thoughts that you rest on. That try to sneak their way in. And you have to be intentional with kind of fighting against those thoughts, because, the negative's always going to sneak in. But eventually, I think if you don't get help or whatever, passively, you allow it, and then it does take control. And then eventually it keeps on playing out until you do something about it, and sadly, I'm surprised, to be honest with you, that this didn't end in his suicide.
Which shows you how narcissistic antisocial he is.
Right.
So basically, they get, and he doesn't, so he's just going to go in and just face the consequences, and he doesn't get, to me, that even makes him scarier. Right.
Because he wouldn't want to give them that satisfaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, even if I'm doing life, I'm still doing life and job. I'm still alive.
Exactly. And to me, a lot of, and with a lot of what you do and what I do, it's a lot about perception. It's a lot about a vibe, and his vibe to me is very cold and calculated.
Yeah, because if this is the person that they wind up, because right now we're going to assume innocence to prove guilty, but let's just say this is him, which we're kind of talking as if it is. If something like this, you would see both dead, take myself out. There'd be another person on that scene, and you're like, okay, easy. But he didn't. I think part of that, like you said, narcissism, or just didn't want to give him the satisfaction. I want to talk about invisible triggers. So we did talk technically that I think it's a mixture of both. I think it's stuff that was mounted up that either he could have tried to suppress or avoid, because it would be just more convenient to do that until eventually it exploded. But there's something that haunts me about the Tepe case. We may never know what the final trigger was that led Michael McKee to allegedly kill Monique and Spencer at approximately 3:52 a.m. on December 30th. It could be something no one else would even notice, and that's because it's not about the event itself. It's about how he interpreted it based on how he felt and the subjective context, because we're talking about suppression. We're talking about avoidance until it just piles up. Now, that's dangerous. We don't know what the trigger was, because it could be stemming from a series of unresolved issues that have been building to a boiling point. Maybe it was seeing them together. Maybe it was a date, an anniversary of the divorce, a holiday they used to celebrate. You don't know. Maybe it was something Monique said or didn't say. Maybe it was realizing she was truly happy with Spencer in a way she never was with him. The trigger might have been an emotional release that equated to a sudden explosion, even though the pressure was built up over time. And here's the thing. Michael may not even be fully aware of what caused the explosion. He may not look back at the unresolved issues that piled up over months or years. He may only focus on what was most immediate, the moment he decided to act, maybe. But premeditation changes this. If prosecutors are right, then the trigger wasn't immediate. The trigger may have happened weeks, months, or even years ago. And what we're seeing at 3:52 a.m. on December 30th isn't the trigger. It's the execution of a plan that was triggered long before. Now, Denise, how can internal or symbolic triggers, things no one else sees, push someone towards crisis behavior without obvious warning signs? In the Tepe case, what could have been the trigger for Michael McKee? Could it have been something as subtle as seeing Monique happy, or as specific as a date or event that held private meaning for him? Meaning for him. But here's what I'm really asking. With premeditation alleged, does the concept of a trigger even apply the same way? If Michael planned this over time, was there a single triggering event, or was it more like a slow accumulation of triggers that eventually led to a decision to act? And when someone finally acts on a plan they've been building for months or years, are they even aware of the accumulation of unresolved issues that brought them to that point? Or do they only focus on the immediate justification they've constructed?
I would guess in this case, it was a slow accumulation of things. It wouldn't surprise me if social media had a lot to do with it, whether he was following her on social media. But what we have to go back and remember is many of us have had difficult times, like the holidays or birthdays or anniversaries, and we have feelings, but most of us, or the majority of us, don't go out and kill somebody or kill the ex. I mean, maybe we go for help and something, but he had some underlying pathology that gave him the ability to carry this out. This is not normal. Like, this is not normal behavior. When I first heard about this case, because I heard that the husband was a dentist, I wonder if it was like a disgruntled patient or something, that somebody that sort of got mad at him, because I had a feeling it was personal. I just didn't know, like somebody knew them. I mean, it just didn't make any sense any other way. But, the ex-husband in this case makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because I actually was leaning more towards something personal as well. But then, they were kind of put in context of a stranger. So I try to leave things all open, because I do try to be as objective as possible. But I always was leaning towards relationships or straying. We actually at one point thought that maybe one could have strayed, because you wouldn't think a relationship from 8 years ago would be relevant now. That's the part that's insane. And you mentioned something that actually leans right into the next question about psychological decompensation. Is what happened here the result of something that was internal, or something that was developed through the power of the situation over time? So this is really interesting to me when I think about Michael McKee. From what we know publicly, there may not have been documented mental health history or obvious red flags that he was a danger to Monique or Spencer. So how does someone go from appearing stable, maybe functioning in daily life, post-divorce, working as a surgeon, maintaining a professional license, to committing an act like this at 3:52 in the morning? I think it could be situationally driven. Instead of addressing what he was feeling about the divorce, about Monique remarrying, about being replaced by Spencer, being replaced by Spencer is very strong. I'm using that word for a reason, or that verbiage. There was suppression or avoidance. No healthy effort for emotional release, just the convenience of immediate comfort through avoidance. And this is where unhealthy rumination can play a part. Actually, this makes me think rumination might lead to obsession and then fixation. Fixation being more about pushing forward with action to resolve tension or conflict. Did Michael ruminate on the divorce? Did that turn into obsession with Monique and Spencer? And did that eventually become fixation, a decision that violence was the only way to resolve what he was feeling? But premeditation adds another layer. If prosecutors are alleging prior calculation and design, then Michael may have been decompensating slowly over time, not in a way anyone could see, but internally. Outwardly stable, professionally functional, but internally collapsing, planning, and calculating. So, Denise, how does psychological decompensation occur in people with no documented mental history or prior red flags? Could Michael McKee have been internally collapsing while appearing outwardly stable? Is this more about situational stress, divorce replacement, identity loss, overwhelming someone's usual coping mechanisms? And in cases like this, do rumination, obsession, and fixation operate in sequence, or do they feed each other in a cycle that accelerates towards action? But here's the critical question with premeditation alleged. Can someone be decompensating internally while simultaneously engaging in methodical planning? How do those two states coexist? And what does that tell us about their psychological state?
Well, certainly as you start to decompensate and you have this underlying pathology, or you have this narcissistic tendency, or this violent tendency, you can see how it all comes together and it works. I mean, this guy, I bet you anything, if you talk to some of the doctors and nurses that he worked with, probably wouldn't feel that it was so far-fetched. I bet he had this underpinning that people could see the tendency. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe he had no documented history. He probably didn't have a whole lot of documented incidences at the hospital, but I bet there was something strange about him. I just, when these things happen, it's not like all of a sudden they just sort of, it happens and everybody's shocked. It's usually, again, this sort of slow build until all of a sudden an act is committed, and then not a lot of people that know him personally are all that surprised. I bet her parents would be very interesting to be able to get some history, because I bet they could tell us a lot. Her parents.
And you're spot on, because I think something did happen in those 2 years they were together, 2015, 2017.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say, on doing my research, there's, I guess, his social network, Michael's, right? There's not a lot of people saying that he was so fixated on her. I mean, I'm thinking, to be honest with you, either he kept it secret and to himself, or like you said, maybe Monique and Spencer knew. But I don't know if he was so outwardly with it. I think even what the family would know probably be within that 2-year window of marriage and divorce, where whatever happened after that 7 months after they were married, then they kind of may have saw who this person really was, or at least in the reflection of Monique's eyes, who she thought he was. And then, okay, but now that they're divorced, it's final, it's over, what would the family know from that day forward? Probably not a lot. So now you're looking at the friends, and the friends are telling you, dude, maybe he never even talked about her, which means that it could have been over her, or he could have just been internalizing it.
Yeah, but I just can't imagine that somehow it didn't seep out. Like Monique didn't go to her parents or her sister or something and talk about, especially when they were married. I mean, like you don't go through a very quick marriage and divorce without, divulging to your family and about some strangeness going on.
Yeah, you're right, because it was sudden, and whatever it was would outweigh the potential for a good future.
Yeah, and she was out. I mean, she was out quickly, so that as
something
a therapist,
scary.
As a therapist, something like major had to have happened. Like, it's not like, oh, they were fighting or something. Like, he had to do something pretty severe for her to get out of that marriage very quickly. Because I mean, that was like the quickest, separation and divorce you've heard.
Let me ask you a question. Do you feel that people are more invested in a marriage at the beginning?
Well, sure. I mean, and in fact, I talked about this in a book that I wrote, Elephants Don't Marry Divorces. Elephants don't marry giraffes. But in divorces, a lot of times, like, usually it's a wife will come to me and she'll tell me about all this stuff that the husband is doing. And I'll be like, you need to get out, because it's like, it's very violent. It's very, it's a lot of power and control. Usually they try to isolate them from their parents, and I can see them grooming them, and I'll say, listen, you got to get out. They're very hard. Those marriages and relationships are very hard to get out of, because the other person gets addicted to them. So they're not easy to get out of. And this is why they can become very violent.
I noticed you use the word addiction a lot today when it comes to marriage. I mean, what?
Oh yeah,
addiction. Right. So let's say, what's the difference between being in love with my wife and wanting to be with her till I die, or being addicted to my wife?
Yeah. Well, one's healthy and one's not. So obviously you get married and you love each other and you're committed to each other and so forth. You get addicted to somebody when all of a sudden you have to have all of them for yourself.
Okay.
She can't go to her parents' house. You have to control the money. She has to call you before she goes somewhere, and you track her and you find out when she's there and when she's coming home. Okay, that's an addiction.
So now that you're saying that, do you think something happened within that 7 months that limited her freedom?
Absolutely.
She's still a young woman.
Absolutely. Something happened where all of a sudden in 7 months, from she goes to marrying a doctor and or whatever, he's in medical school, to all of a sudden she's, no kids, no nothing, she's out. So absolutely something happened. And I bet
I don't want you going out with your friends. I want to have control of this avenue, because you're right. Whatever it was something sudden and unforgivable that they couldn't work past in spite of a potential for a great future.
Terrific. Exactly. Terrifically said.
So they would have more motivation to want to work it out, but something must have been so severe that they couldn't work it out.
Exactly. And not only that, but she was out, and she was out quickly.
Yeah, something.
Yeah. So something egregious was there.
I don't know if it was abusive, because they would have mentioned that by now.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's something that relates to. Well, either way, it could be something related to some level of control where she felt she lost her autonomy.
Yeah,
I feel something to that effect.
Yeah, and honestly, if we're looking at it, we would say, well, without this happening, we would say, oh, that's good. She recognizes she got out of it, she moved on, and she had children, but he never went away, which is even scarier. That tells you what he was capable of. God knows what would have happened if she stayed married to him.
And 8 years later.
Yeah.
But you know what?
I've had cases like this, so I've seen it.
You make a great point, because if she did remain married to him, she would probably live a lesser life. Yeah. Because I would assume, he wouldn't have waited 8 years. The moment he would lose control and couldn't regain it, who knows what he would have done in that moment when she was more available.
Yeah.
To him.
Yeah.
So I got planned versus emotional violence. So this is a learning point for me. So I find this question really interesting when I think about what happened to Monique and Spencer. In my opinion, I think people expect violence to be chaotic and explosive because that matches the emotion they assume is behind it. But maybe in the Tepe case, it wasn't about the violence itself. Maybe it was about control. And by the way, guys, you got to love AI, because I tell AI to ask me 12 questions. And then what I do is I answer the questions, and it just builds off what you put into it. Because it's answered exactly how. This is just me venting in my car, and then it just formulates it where I can express it better.
I just vent to you.
And what?
I just vent to you.
I vent to you too. It's just that when I'm trying to put together these shows, I ask this is what I want to cover. These areas I want to hit. I want to mention this to the mental health professional. What are some questions that I can answer to formulate a good show? So it asks me 12 questions, and then I go ahead and answer the questions, and then it formulates the response. So again, this was a learning point for me. So let me revisit this again. So this is a learning point for me. So I find this question really interesting when I think about what happened to Monique and Spencer. So in my opinion, I think people expect violence to be chaotic and explosive because that matches the emotion they assume is behind it. But maybe in the Tepe case, it wasn't about the violence itself. Maybe it was about control, like you mentioned. And control can be subjective. It might not have been about expressing rage at Monique or Spencer. It might have been about resolving something internally for Michael. Betrayal, revenge, jealousy. We actually discussed all three.
We did.
The violence could have been methodical because the goal wasn't emotional release. The goal was resolution, and resolution for Michael may have required control. And now we know prosecutors are alleging exactly that: premeditation, prior calculation and design. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was this, if the state is right, this was planned. Michael may have decided that the only way to resolve his feelings about Monique and Spencer was to eliminate them. And then he planned how to do it. That means the act itself at 3:52 a.m. might have been calm, methodical, even cold. Not because he didn't feel anything, but because he had made peace with what he was going to do. He had time to think it through, time to plan, time to prepare. And that includes the ripple effect.
Right. Very, very
now,
methodical.
Denise, why do people expect violent acts to look emotionally explosive or chaotic when clinically they often don't? Is it possible that in the Tepe case, the violence wasn't about emotional release at all, but about control, resolution, or eliminating what Michael perceived as an obstacle? And with prosecutors now alleging prior calculation and design, premeditation, what does that tell us about Michael's psychological state leading up to the murders? Could he have been calm and methodical, not because he lacked emotion, but because he had already decided this was the solution? And clinically, what's the difference between someone who kills in the heat of passion versus someone who spends time planning? What does that planning phase look like psychologically?
Well, it can be, it's hard, again, it's hard to know why people do what they do. But a lot of times, in this case, he just wanted to go in and take care of it. Like he didn't, sometimes we hear about torture, or it took a long time for somebody to die and so forth. That really has to do a lot with the pathology sort of behind it. But in this case, it looked like he just had enough and he went in and he just ended it. But he planned the time and he planned that the kids were not going to be harmed. And I mean, so he did think through a lot of the necessary steps, but why people commit the crimes that they do and how they do it and all of that, a lot of this has to do with the amount of obsessing and fixation, and sometimes it actually can be somewhat of a fantasy with how they imagine it's all going to turn out, which is, very sickening within itself.
Well, when we saw him in court, and now we look at it from the context that's in front of us here that we just mentioned, we haven't mentioned that maybe when he went into court, he was calm and cool because he's accepted his fate. Like, is that part of the plan? Yeah,
and it's done. He's done it. The thing to me is, I don't know why he didn't turn the gun on himself. Like, why does he want to go through his whole life either in jail or go for the death penalty and all that? I just can't imagine that. But, I mean, it's hard to know what he was thinking.
I mean, it's unique because for someone that may want control, you just gave your control over to the criminal justice system.
It's true.
But let me ask, we got 2 more questions left, it looks like, right? Yeah, 2 more questions. Wait. No, three more, 10, 11, 12. Let me just make sure. Yeah, I had 3 more. Hey, let me ask one more question, though, before we go to question 10 here. Is there a chance? Well, you know what? Let me not. Okay. It's coming up. Let me not. Sorry. Because, as you develop this, I already have where I want to progress towards.
Yeah. And sometimes we've already covered it because we have some really good discussions.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about the shot count and the misinterpretation. I think that is important. So this is unique in the Tepe case, and it's something a lot of people have been talking about. Spencer was shot multiple times. Monique was shot once. A lot of energy was spent on Spencer. Some people have speculated that Michael could have felt betrayed by Monique, but hated Spencer. That's where the jealousy comes in. That Spencer was seen as the obstacle between him and Monique, or the reason they couldn't reconcile, the person who replaced him. I think that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If it wasn't for Spencer, I could be with her.
Yep.
I think people assign emotional meaning to details like shot count because it adds context. It makes it less random. It provides narrative. That's why we look at those closer to the victims to see where there's emotional investment. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying this to excuse or justify what Michael allegedly did. I'm saying it to understand it, because understanding is how we prevent the next Monique and Spencer from being killed. But with premeditation now alleged, the shot count takes on different meaning. If this was planned, then every shot was a choice. It wasn't panic. It wasn't rage. It was execution of a plan. And if Spencer was shot multiple times and Monique once, that may tell us something about who Michael saw as the primary obstacle and who he saw as collateral to his goal.
Yep.
So now, Denise, why do people assign emotional meaning to details like shot count or sequence, even when those details don't reliably explain motive? In the Tepe case, Spencer was shot multiple times, Monique once. Does that difference actually tell us anything psychologically about Michael's state of mind? Could it indicate that Spencer was the primary target, the obstacle, the source of Michael's rage, or are we projecting narrative onto forensic details that may not carry the emotional weight we think they do? But here's what changes with premeditation. If prosecutors are right and this was planned, does the shot count become more meaningful? Does it suggest calculated intent rather than emotional reaction? And what does it tell us?
Yeah. And intention would be a key question. Was he trying to punish him? Why do that? And like both of them didn't seem like they were big people. So it didn't seem like it was necessary. Plus, he's a doctor. He probably knows how to end somebody's life. So, I mean, to me, it's sort of, as my mom would say, it's making a statement. You know, there's a reason that he only shoots her once and he shoots him multiple times. But I'm guessing he's punishing him.
Would it be weird for me to say that one was fueled by jealousy or hate, the other by betrayal and compassion? Could those two exist at the same time?
I wouldn't say betrayal and compassion. I would just say betrayal. It's hard to have both because they're both completely opposite.
Are they? I'm saying, like, they could be. I could be wrong. I was just saying, like, let's say someone burned me, but they were still close to me at one point. Could I still take them out and not care about them? Or even when I take them out, could that be the hardest thing I've ever done? But I feel I have to. Mm-hmm. Like, could he have felt that doing this was something he had to do, that he was so obsessed with it that he had to do it? Even if he didn't want to do it, he had to do it. He
had to do it for him to get relief from the obsessing and the, right. I mean, so he did it for him.
So if let's say, because I believe he's narcissistic. I agree with that.
Yeah, I would even go into
I believe that. But let me ask this though, just to kind of, so let's say he had to do it for him, and he realizes that he had to do that for him, for whatever that sense of relief would be. Mm-hmm. And guys, I'm just asking, so bear with me. Could he then feel regret because he had to kill her to get that sense of freedom?
Or maybe because he had a relationship with her, he only shot her once, and because he had no relationship with him, or, you know, it's really hard to know, honestly, why people do what they do. I mean, sometimes when I'm in a session, people explain to me and I'm thinking that makes no sense. So, I mean, it's hard to know when you're in that emotional state, you know, when you get into that sort of out of your mind, like why you're doing what you're doing. Sometimes it's hard to predict. For me, I would think punishing for him.
And ultimately, no matter what, he would still justify it by blaming them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So no matter how he would look at it, the reason why he did it would be because of either Spencer being the obstacle to prevent them from being together, or you betrayed me.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the greater feeling? Is it the betrayal because he's more connected to her? Is betrayal a greater feeling over jealousy?
I think with this case, I think he lost power and control over her. And then after that, if he couldn't have her, no one was going to have her. And I think it just got worse the more she moved on with her life and began to have a family and children. And she married a dentist. It wasn't like, you know, she was doing worse. If anything, she was thriving. And in his mind, that was not acceptable.
And I think it was so premeditated. He went in there and he made a point, and however he did it. Like I think I could picture him having some control, but saying what he had to say because he's been living with these feelings for so long. And basically now, because I suffered, you're going to watch this happen. However he did it. Mm-hmm. If you want to steal my love or whatever it is, and then he kills Monique first and lets him watch, or you betrayed me. Well, here's what happens to the people that you betray me with.
I agree. I agree with that 100%.
Because that would have been his chance to vent over the 8 years of whatever it was he was feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he could have shot Spencer many times and she's there. And then all of a sudden he just takes her out with one bullet.
Could you imagine
surprise me.
8 years and it coming out in a matter of however many minutes that was, or seconds?
I can imagine if I were a therapist or a clinician sort of going in and meeting with him, I imagine I would walk out of there with chills.
Really?
Yeah. I imagine.
So you don't think he walked in and just did it? I think that it was planned. It was methodical, and I think he wanted them to know how he felt.
And I think so too. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. Certainly we're speculating. It wouldn't surprise me.
Because that's got to add to the final act. It's not even just about killing, but also I'm going to tell him how I feel.
Well, or I'm going to make sure that they're aware of me and what the consequence is.
Yeah, either it's going to be aggressive for the need for control, or it could be, this is how you made me feel, and now this is what.
And now you pay.
And now you pay.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell people you have to let the facts speak because you're never really going to know everything about why Michael McKee allegedly killed Monique and Spencer, including the internal processes behind why he did what he did. You may think you have an understanding, but you never really know unless you're directly involved in collecting the evidence, interviewing Michael, processing the case. Everything else is speculation based on our own biases.
True.
That's why we have to leave it to the experts. The investigation is ongoing. The legal process will unfold, and we have to respect the process even when it's uncomfortable to not have all the answers right now. But I will say this. The upgraded charges to premeditated, aggravated murder tell us that prosecutors believe they have evidence of planning. That's not speculation. That's a legal allegation that will have to be proven in court. So while we don't know motive, we do know that the state believes this wasn't impulsive, and that matters. And now McKee has waived his extradition hearing, which means he's agreed to be transported to Ohio to face those charges. That's a procedural step, but it's significant. It means the case is moving forward and we're getting closer to answers through the legal process. Okay, second to last question here. Denise, how can people sit with uncertainty in cases like the Tepe murders without filling in gaps with speculation or blame, kind of like what we're doing now?
Yeah.
What's the
It's hard not to.
psychological, huh?
It's hard
It's
not
hard
to.
not to. What's the psychological cost of demanding answers before the facts are in, especially when people start constructing narratives about Michael's motives before law enforcement has even released one? And how do we balance our need for understanding with the reality that some questions take time to answer responsibly? But also, with prosecutors now alleging premeditation, does that change the conversation? Does knowing that the state believes this was planned help the public process this case differently, even if we don't know the specific motive yet?
Yeah, well, we sort of talked about this before. It's like at the end of the day, you want to make sense of it. You want to sort of like get it resolved, put it in a box, understand it, and then move on. It's just, whether it's premeditated or what happened. It's once you sort of get all the details, then you finally feel like, oh, okay, now I can move on. So that's just something that just, by nature, something that we want to know so that we feel better about a situation.
And you know what's funny? The cases seem to be most intriguing when the answers are still yet to be found. And then most times when people find them, they move on to the next case. But I like to stay a little bit longer because I still feel that there's stuff to be looked at in the moment that are harder questions to ask, like what we're doing right now.
Right.
The reason why we're bringing these questions to the surface, it could reflect this. We don't know. But we're using this case as an example for a bigger discussion. So granted, even if this case had a different motive and went a different way, we still create evergreen material because this would still be worth looking at because what we're saying is still relevant. It just may not be relevant here.
Yeah. And we're also looking to prevent. And if you don't sort of go in and really analyze, then how are you going to get insight to prevent something moving forward? I mean, what I know about when you're in a relationship with somebody narcissistic and they can sort of tip the scale and go to that antisocial and get very violent is you never should underestimate them. And you got to consider that. You think, oh, that would never happen to me. And oh, that's a situation that happened to her. It can happen to you. And that's the risk of getting in a relationship with somebody who's unhealthy.
Yeah, actually, the final question's repetitive, so I can get right to the closing.
Okay.
Remarks. So, yeah, it is. It's asking again how to process, or I'm saying being respectful as a true crimer. So understanding motive in the Tepe case is about. Sorry, guys, still have that cough, but it's leaving. It's just I still have it.
Lingering.
It's lingering. Understanding motive in the Tepe case is about prevention and awareness, not excuse. Michael McKee is fully responsible for his actions if he is found guilty. The state now alleges these actions were premeditated, planned, calculated, carried out with the prior design at approximately 3:52 a.m. on December 30th. The allegation, if proven, tells us this wasn't a momentary loss of control. It was a decision made over time, and exploring the psychological frameworks that might lead someone to make that kind of decision helps us protect future victims without harming the families who are living through the nightmares right now. McKee has waived extradition and will face those charges in Ohio. The legal process is moving forward. Curiosity is human, but responsibility is a choice. And as of right now, guys, justice is one step forward, and justice takes time, at least to get justice that matters. Hey, Denise, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, I would love for people to come visit me at deniseschoenwald.com, connect with me. I'd love to send you a copy of one of my books.
Yes, and guys, we have been getting a lot of followers, I would like to recommend you guys check out the other videos because we do cover a lot of different crime cases. Me and Denise had a great discussion. I'm gonna point you in the direction of this one video that I thought we did good. I wind up doing 2 videos on this, and Denise was involved in the second video when we did this, but it is the case of Heather Thompson. Happened out of Tennessee. It's when the mother, she killed both her children, the grandmother, and killed herself. And the first video will explain the case. The second video that me and Denise did broke down why this could happen. And I would like to see these videos get some more views. So guys, if you get a chance and you're subscribing to this video, know that we put this much effort into everything that we put in. You know, we read off the facts, and in some cases we have deep dive discussions when we're more comfortable with the case. That would be a discussion I think you guys would enjoy. And then also me and Siobhan Scott, another mental health professional, we covered trauma for children. And that was related to this case, but we also touched on the UPS case as well, where they, you know, people dressed up as fake UPS guys and they broke into a house and the kids were present when their family was murdered. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. I do have a link to buy me a cup of coffee. It's in the description as well as the top of the YouTube channel. As always, guys, stay safe.